Alright, so here's a little update on Oscar from Switz's, or Oscar 2 as I like to call it, because it's a resculpt and it'll never be, you know, perfectly identical, but, I try my best with what minimal references I have. So this is the latest version. I actually haven't touched this in a couple of weeks, but I figured I'd do a little update. It is interesting to look back at the other sculpts and see, what needs to change or what, like how much different those ones look as it gets more and more accurate. So with this one, the idea here was to focus more on digital texturing versus printing. So with this particular one, the brows, and obviously I started on the beard, even though that's not exactly in the right spot, are sculpted, whereas some of the other ones were intended to be printed and then having use of real fur, just like the actual animatronic would have. So with this one, I just figured, okay, let me get as accurate as I can, um, and make it so that I can take it in Painter and see how close it can really be. Again, it's not going to be 100%. I mean, that's just sculpting is. Um, it's also a matter of taking these different photos with different angles and perspectives and realizing that um, the cameras are going to be like different focal lengths and things of that nature. So you can adjust the focal length, which is pretty interesting in here. So you can change how he's appearing. Obviously, this is 3D and 2D, which sometimes makes it tricky. Um, so it has helped to have printouts of his in 3D to kind of look at what needs to change. But so that's been a little bit tricky. Also, digital versus clay. With clay, you can be on an atomic scale, like you slice into something, and you can really mold it to where you want. With this, I can make subdivisions and go really far, but you're still going to have some limitation of your faces and vertices. So, but other than that, you're just referencing old photos, considering again the angle, um, using educated ideas of what the focal length could be, um, because that's going to change how the distances appear. So, like from, okay, his upper lip to the tip of his nose, interocular distance between the eyes, like the actual height of the head. It has helped us to actually sculpt in some of his fur, which he doesn't have his hair yet, but obviously that's a part of him. I started to block out the body just to kind of get that look of his shoulders. Um, kind of did some work on the beard, but it is a little tricky. Like you do have some limitations, um, and I'm not, a master sculptor. Like I'm relatively new to this frontier as a student, but overall, looking back, like this is definitely the most accurate one, and I'm confident that once this is textured in digital, like it'll be tricky to not just see Oscar appearing and maybe even tricking people into thinking it's the real deal. But um, I've been as accurate as possible. Counting the lines, like looking at every detail in the photos and different media provided. But I would say it's definitely at the point where if it's not him or again Oscar 2, that it's definitely of the same camp or from the same line or mold, and then when you paint it, it just looks like it was a different version. That because if you watch modern animatronic shops and how things go down the line and just quick airbrushing and stuff, there's going to be variations, and that's not a bad thing. But yeah, so this is him so far. I haven't touched it in a couple of weeks. I got kind of burnt out because I was having printer problems because I was in the process of printing a version out that was about a foot tall, so a relatively large size head, um, that was going to be painted and then real fur applied like the real thing, but just as a statue. So, um, but overall, it's going okay. Like I would say, it's like using the old photos is tricky, but that's any sculpting. Even at wax museums, they're usually using minimal photographs. They probably have a profile shot and a front view. Um, so then it's kind of up to the artist to be able to make it come to life. But I think overall it's going fine. Like he's appearing, and once I get this one painted again, and I don't know how far I'm gonna really go with the body yet. If I'm gonna try to fully sculpt him in one project file, or delete this and just focus on the head and come back to that. So the focus is still just, you know, getting him as in 3D space digitally as accurate to the original as possible. And again, even if it's not, it's still an ogre of like the same camp, if not his twin. There's certain things that got a little screwy, like his ear. I had to append a new piece of clay and work that in, and that was now it's got this seam being tricky to merge in. So there are some things like I wouldn't really want to start over with him. Um, I certainly could, and I feel like now having the feeling of how he shapes out in 3D, it would probably go a lot faster. And obviously, you have a file to reference now, but other than that, I think it's looking pretty good. It's when I look back at the other versions or before he got to where he is now, I can definitely see a difference, and he's kind of invoking the real thing to me now. Without the eyes, like that's why I like to carve in the eyes when I'm working on him because that helps me visualize. So it's just those blank um, eyeballs. It's pretty tricky, but overall, it's pretty cool. It's been a fun little project to try and bring him back to life. Um, as I understand, the owner of the original has now come out and they're starting a restoration project that'll obviously take years. So actually started this before I heard anything about that. And I had this idea for years before I was actually doing um, any kind of 3D modeling or digital sculpting anyway, and thinking of ways that I could bring him back. But yeah, so for now it's just like a fun personal project. Ideally, if I could have, if once I get the filament issue sorted and this is finalized, it would be fun to make maybe some prints available. I don't think I'll make the like. It's tempting to make the 3D file readily available, but being that he is rare, I kind of want to keep him that way. um, Especially after all the work that has gone into it. But I'll figure that out when I have to cross that bridge. But for now, it's just like I said, this one's gonna be for digital, seeing how good he can look once he's textured and in a CG environment, and then once I figure out the printer, ideally I can get a 12-inch version, statue version printed out and see how he looks. Because so far, the other sculpts, when they've been printed on a small scale, like 4 or 5 inch, they're really cool. It's definitely pretty surreal to see him in person in 3D again. So anyway, that's all.